Minister Zafrul, thank you so much for taking the time talking to us here. Now, this year Malaysia is at the SCO summit as a guest country. How do you feel about it? What are your key takeaways from it regarding economic cooperation? Because this organization was initially founded to enhance regional stability and security, but over the years, one of the primary objectives has now become facilitating trade and investment, right? How are you looking at this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it was great that we've been invited, and of course our Prime Minister himself attended the session, and it's timely with what's happening in the world today. If we look at the geopolitics, the geoeconomics, this is a time where countries need to get together to address some of the concerns, and SCO is an example of the importance of multilateralism. This is an important part where in the world today where we live in a multipolar world, countries like Malaysia, which is a very open economy, needs to continue to engage, and China is showing the way where how important it is to be inclusive in our approach, not just in diplomatic and security, but also in economy, especially when it comes to trade and investment.
What do you make of the consensus being reached at the SCO summit? What stood out to you the most?
Yeah, well, to me, I think what's important when President Xi talked about global governance, right? This year we celebrated 80 years of the establishment of United Nations, for example, and 80 years since the end of World War II. Things have changed, with AI, with 4IR initially. Many progress have been made within that 80 years. The question now is whether that progress that we made, accelerated in recent times especially, is it still relevant of the institutions we have today? The multilateral institutions, of course, United Nations is one of them. Talking about World Trade Organization, we're talking about IMF, we're talking about World Bank, ADB, all the various multilateral platforms that we have today. Is it still relevant? Is it still inclusive? Is it sustainable? And does it represent the world today? The economic order that we have today. So these are questions I think was raised during the SCO meeting. Of course, Secretary General of UN was also there, right? And I think it's important that we continue to see how we can improve on the system. But you need to transform, right? To continue to be relevant, or else people will start not believing in these institutions.
While you are here, have you had the opportunity to meet business leaders from both China and Malaysia? Any plans for future cooperations, maybe?
Yes, we had met many today. Of course, we had a very good sessions where the Prime Minister himself met quite a number of Chinese companies. We met Huawei, ZTE, we met the National Semiconductor Association, the China Semiconductors Industry Association as well, because Malaysia and China, we have a very strong relationship when it comes to semiconductor as well. And at the same time, we're having this Malaysia-China Business Association meeting today where the Prime Minister will address 132 business people to discuss about how to collaborate. Because China and Malaysia, we have been working very closely together on investment, but in terms of trade as well, 16 consecutive years where China is Malaysia's largest trading partner.
That's right. And speaking about that, the trade between the two countries last year hit a record high of over $212 billion US dollars. What do you think is fueling that trade boom, and where does Malaysia want to see more cooperation?
In today's world, China, of course, is not just Malaysia's largest trading partner, it's also ASEAN's largest trading partner. So Malaysia, of course, is chair ASEAN today. We have just recently upgraded the ASEAN-China FTA. And in October, all the ASEAN countries will be signing with China the new ASEAN-China FTA, version 3.0, pushing ahead on the digital and green agenda. So we feel that with that upgrade of the FTA, there will be further trade between Malaysia and, of course, ASEAN countries. And don't forget, we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, where China, of course, is part of RCEP together with other countries in ASEAN, and of course Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Korea is the biggest trade FTA in the world. So, to say that globalization is dead, I think is still premature. But of course, at the same time, we have challenges, and for us, as a Malaysian economy and representing ASEAN, it's important to come to China, engage the business entities, the business people here about how we need to strengthen our relationship when it comes to trade and investment.
On top of being Malaysia's biggest trading partner for 16 consecutive years, China is also the second largest foreign investment source for Malaysia. And the big ones, if you take a closer look, high-tech industries, automotives, also infrastructure. What do you think that Malaysia can offer to keep attracting these investments? And where do you see room for more growth?
We've seen strong interest in the high-tech sector. You just mentioned that sector. In fact, on Thursday, the Prime Minister will be going to our automotive high-tech valley, where it's primarily driven by investments from China. We have Geely there, a big presence of Geely. BYD is opening their factory there as well. Of course, we have Chery already in another state, and all moving into the EV technology, all adopting. Because Malaysia, we are very large player in the semiconductor industry, right? And that's why I mentioned earlier that we met the Chinese Semiconductor Industry Association, where the many of the supply chain and the trade between Malaysia and China is also on semiconductor and investment. You mentioned investment. Of course, China is continue to be a big investor in Malaysia, as you mentioned just now correctly, is number 2 in terms of investment. And there's 3 sectors that we're looking very closely with China. Today, the Prime Minister met up with Huawei and ZTE, for example. We want to see increased adoption of digital, especially AI, how our Malaysian companies should further adopt the usage of AI to improve productivity, competitiveness, etc., and working closely with Chinese technology, Chinese companies, and want them to invest as well in Malaysia. And secondly, I think when I mentioned about automotive, right, automotive and EV, they all use semiconductor components, the power chips, etc. This is where, when we talk about supply chain resiliency, supply chain security, Malaysia can provide the right ecosystem for the automotive industry, especially the EV automotive industry. And finally, on the green transition, we talk about renewable energy, talking about talking about clean energy, green energy, etc. This is again where Malaysia feels that between Malaysian companies and the Chinese company, we can work further together to embrace the energy transition.